everybody. Dave Rauch here, CEO of ProTech Building Services, and welcome to the Maintenance Manager. And I'm here today with Adrian Adams from Adams Sterling Law Firm. And Adrian, if you could just tell us a little bit about the law firm itself first. What areas do you service? And
Okay, well, we are one of the largest law firms in California that deals exclusively with homeowner associations. And we serve as corporate counsel to them, and we've got 10 offices around the state.
Wow.
So and we keep pretty busy just dealing with all of the issues involving associations.
And how many employees do you have?
It's over 30 employees.
Okay, quite a few.
I haven't really counted them lately.
You have a few. So if you don't know, Adrian is an amazing marketing guru. He's got the most amazing newsletter and database of information, and we definitely want to touch on that. So can you tell us a little bit first, Adrian, about the newsletter, and then we'll go on to the database.
Okay. Well, the newsletter I launched in 2000, around 2000, 2002, I guess. And it was, at the time, one of the first electronic newsletters in California, in our industry. And because I was tired of doing paper, and I thought I could get a better reach getting information out to people by doing digital, and there's just a lot more of that going on. And it really took off. And it's helped to me in the writing and answering questions to then roll that information over into the website I created so that people could use the website for information.
Yep, and I actually have used your website a couple times. One to research solar systems, and another time to research feral pigs, a Texas problem.
Right.
And so it's extremely helpful. It was helpful to me. And you were telling me that how many people access your newsletter and then database? I think you have the numbers right there.
Well, I've got for the subscriber base on the newsletter is 30,000. And then I ran stats yesterday on the website, and we get 1.3 million visits to the website per year.
Amazing.
And the pages that they're on the website, viewing pages, 3.2 million pages.
Amazing. Just, you've done an amazing job, I have to tell you.
Thank you.
And I enjoy when your newsletter hits my inbox. I read it that day.
Yeah.
It's really fun to read too, and you make it humorous, don't you?
I do.
You do.
Right. Put in humor.
Kind of dry humor.
Yes.
But I like it, and I think all your readers like it too.
Yeah, it was funny. Sometimes they don't get the humor.
Yep.
And I'll get these emails coming in going, "What did you say that for?"
Yep. Now, you just told me a little while ago that the story of how you met your partner. So you want to touch on that real quick?
Yeah, Larry is the author of the Davis-Sterling Act, the law in California governing homeowner associations. And and I hadn't previously met him, didn't know where he lived, wasn't sure, if he was even in the state. And because the weekly newsletters I was sending out, he wrote me an email, and he said, "Great job, I like what you're doing." Signed, Larry Sterling. I emailed him back, and I go, "Are you the Larry Sterling, author of the Davis-Sterling Act?" He goes, "Yeah, that's me." And so we got together and had lunch, and then I invited him to join the firm, and he did. And so that's where the name comes from is Adams Sterling Law Firm.
That's amazing. What a great story.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yep.
Very knowledgeable.
Well, I think the amount of education you provide is just amazing and so helpful for our industry. But let's touch on real quick, do you have any ideas on how boards of directors, how we can, I know CAI and CACM do a lot of heavy lifting on education.
They do.
But you know, and I know that a lot of boards don't like to go out and educate themselves. Maybe the solution is some kind of electronic means, education. So do you have any ideas on how boards can get basic HOA information, board service information?
Yeah, it's a problem. It's easy for managers because they get certification. So there's there's an incentive for them to get educated, and they're trying to manage, deal with boards and advise them. So managers, the educational level in the last 20 years has risen dramatically with managers. And I have to say they do a great job. With boards, they're volunteers, they're busy, they've got families. they're doing this in their free time, and for the most part, they just don't have time and don't want to take the time,
Yeah.
for the education. But what I've noticed over the years is that a lot of them go to our website and get information there. So if they want a quick answer on something, they just simply go on the website, and we have a Google search within the website so that they can put in a search term and find anything they want. And so they kind of get information there.
Sure, sure. Well, it's a good thing that you have that available for everybody. Wanted to hit on another subject that I think you've seen probably a lot of management companies buying other management companies.
Yes.
Roll-ups. And I don't think we're going to run into a situation where we have just two management companies in California like Home Depot and Lowe's. But what do you see? Do you see this roll-up of management companies continuing? And do you see it as a good thing?
Okay.
The loss of small management companies.
Yes. Well, what's happening is, somebody will, build a company, starts from mom and pop, and then they build it into a decent-sized company. But it comes time to retire, and how do you do that? And how do you sell the company? And another smaller company isn't necessarily going to buy another company, but a big company will. And so for them, it's their means to retirement, and the way to get out of the business. But and what not only, for the larger companies, it's not only the opportunity for them to retire, but the larger companies, they bring to the table systems that make more efficient on the management. So they have economies of scale. They have a lot more to offer, and so that's why they're growing and they're able to get business. But I don't see them taking over the market and eliminating all small companies, because you'll have, again, individuals that will say, "Hey, I'm going to start up a company," and they fit a niche. There's a need for them. And the smaller associations, smaller to medium-sized associations that can't afford the big management companies, and the big management companies don't want the smaller associations. So there's a real need there. And so I think the smaller companies will always be here.
Yeah.
And I think that they will grow as they have done. And they themselves may get big enough to gobble up other ones and become regional, large regional management companies. So I don't see that really as a problem.
Good. That's good news. A similar issue is there seems to me to be a lot of manager churn these days. Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of...
It's not just me.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a tough industry.
Yeah. Let's turn to AB 5, which is the California's independent contractor law, which was recently redefined. Right. Is that the right term? And I think that was about a year or two ago. But I know it was challenged by, I think it was Lyft.
I think so.
Not Uber. It might have been Uber and Lyft. But it's challenged. I think it's being appealed right now. But I think it's going to be coming out. I think it's going to become effective. And in my mind, I don't know why any homeowner association would want to be a California employer.
Right. Yeah, no, the laws in California are so difficult and complicated dealing with employment law. And the AB 5 was really problematic in that, requiring, basically what smaller associations were doing was that they have a homeowner, he may be retired, and he'd be the handyman, and so they'd pay him, and not as an employer, but as an independent contractor.
Right.
And with the redefining of what an independent contractor is and what an employee is, it basically eliminated all of the independent contractors. And so they defined it as...
The new law.
The new law.
Yeah.
Right. And so that all of these smaller ones suddenly became employees, and it really hurt the associations because they couldn't really deal with all of these laws and all of the requirements, and it effectively put a lot of these retirees out of business, so they couldn't really work for the associations, and they had to go to the larger companies and hire people.
Right.
And so it's really problematic, and I can see why it's being challenged by Lyft.
Yeah, and I see that as a real challenge for some homeowner associations that don't want to give up their employees.
Right.
Because as someone in the law, you know that there's no problem until there's a problem.
Right.
Until somebody gets injured.
Yes.
and in the handyman business or in the construction business, injuries are actually very common, unfortunately. Right. So we see them.
Yes.
All too often.
Yeah, and that's why we've encouraged all associations, whether they have employees or not, to get workers' comp insurance and to help deal with that problem.
Exactly. Let's touch on Surfside, the Champlain Tower collapse, which happened in Surfside, Florida, in 21, and you were on two of the task forces.
Yes, I was on task forces through the Foundation for Community Association Research.
Right.
And I'm currently president of the foundation.
Right.
And we were on the task force. I think you were on the task force as well. And turned out, in fact, I brought with me one of the things that the foundation put out, which is Breaking Point, dealing with the problem of deferred maintenance and the failure to deal with some of these issues that needed to be dealt with. And this report came out before the Champlain Towers collapsed.
Just before it,
Just before.
Yep.
And then the towers went down.
And then the task force the task forces developed some ideas or best practices that were then given by CAI to legislatures. I think it was given to them in Orlando, Florida.
Right.
Recommending that they adopt a lot of these things, which, one thing is to have a reserve study, which I was amazed to find out that only 7 states have requirements to have a reserve study.
Right, it is amazing.
And then, of course, there was recommendations on maintenance and maintenance manuals and other things, but it's really up to each state as to what they adopt. Right. And I do know Florida did adopt some best practices. New Jersey's adopted some things too. What do you think is going to be? Well, let me ask you this: have you heard about the 2 recent evacuations? There was one in South Carolina. I think the community was called Renaissance. It was a high-rise, and they're now evacuated. These were recent occurrences. The other one occurred 1.5 miles away from the Champlain Towers. Yeah, it was called Port Royal, I believe, and they had to evacuate. And again, both of these other 2 were also structural steel issues. So, in my opinion, the problem really lies in the beginning of the building, where the board is not given instructions on how to properly maintain the building. They're not even told to reserve funds to replace major common area components, let alone how to maintain them. And so anyhow, what's your take on the Champlain Towers collapse?
Yeah, it revealed a number of problems that are just kind of systemic in the industry. One is that you've already touched on, the lack of maintenance manuals and the real need for boards, because they're volunteers. And so there needs to be consistency, some kind of guidelines for them in how to maintain the building, because they don't know, and so that would be a real plus, having some kind of instructions, a maintenance manual for dealing with that. Secondly, every state should adopt a requirement for reserve studies. And then the thing that I'd like to see is some kind of requirement that there have some basic funding level of the reserves. Because even here in California, there isn't a requirement for funding level.
Right.
And I've dealt with associations where funding levels were 7%, 12%, and then they get hit with a huge special assessment. Then there's litigation that follows. Yes, there's all kinds of problems that go with it, and the problem is that boards are reluctant to raise dues and reluctant to special assess. And they don't want to come under, their neighbors, the pressure from them. Why are you doing this? And so they defer. And that was one of the problems with the Champlain Towers. And interestingly enough, you'd think, well, that could never happen anywhere else. We've already got 2 buildings that have been evacuated. And then we represented a high-rise here in Los Angeles. having very similar problems as Champlain Towers with two separate reports telling
Structural steel?
they needed to do something immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And so a board came on, hired us, said, let's get it done. And what happened? Some of the homeowners, removed them, got on the board.
So they got recalled?
Yes, and forced them off and
Jeez.
decided they were not going to move forward, and so we fired them. So we're not going to be a part of that. But so what boards need are something that they can fall back on and say, look, we have no choice. We have to raise the dues because the law says that we got to fund the reserves.
I know that there's a number of folks in our industry that say that problem there with the board not having any extrinsic motivation to raise dues, right? There's nothing that says they have to raise the dues.
Right.
And there's no penalties if they don't, and it's so hard to do it because they're doing it not only on the neighbors but themselves, and that's Champlain Towers. But there's got to be some mechanism, some way to fix that, and I just don't know what it is. But in my opinion, until we get that fix, we really have to get the maintenance plan or a maintenance manual and the maintenance programs in place, so at least a board that's generally curious knows where to turn to learn how to maintain their building.
Yes, yeah, and they can hire somebody in, to be their maintenance supervisor, their chief engineer, and hand them the manual. Said, okay, here's what you need to do. And to go back to I'm not in favor of penalties for not reserving. Instead, I'm in favor of a requirement of certain funding levels, and I think that would be enough of an incentive to get things moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I just would hate to see another collapse like that.
Oh,
happen.
yes.
That would, on our watch.
Right.
Be really bad. But so let's turn from Surfside back here to California, and we have unique law, SB 326, the EEE, Exterior Elevated Elements.
Right.
And that law is very interesting too, and I'm sure you're getting many, many questions from boards and managers on that law.
Yes, we are.
And I think the interesting thing about that law is that so many unknowns, right? I think we know there's a lot of knowns. We know we have till 2025 to do the first inspections.
Right.
But a lot of managers, they get an estimate to do the inspections, and it's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 just to do the inspection, let alone the repairs.
Right.
And so I think that causes people to just stop dead in the headlights and not know what to do.
Yeah, I've been speaking regularly on the issue and writing in the newsletter about it, and we have a big section on the website dealing with it. And because they've got 2 years now left that they need to get this stuff done, and they wonder, where are we going to get the money to do this? Well, because it deals with the maintenance issue, long-term, large component issues, they can use money from the reserves in order to do the inspections, and I'm encouraging them to do that, because they need to know what they don't know, and how big do we have a problem, how big is the problem? And the sooner they find out, the easier it's going to be to get ready to get the monies in place in order to make the repairs. Right. And the balconies, exterior elevated elements, not just balconies, supported by wood, there have been collapses. Right. And here in California, and people's injured and killed. And so it was actually a good thing, and the CAI, their Legislative Action Committee, was behind that, and I spoke to that issue at one of the meetings, and so it was good that they actually got it through a reasonable piece of legislation to deal with this issue. Right. And I'm frankly glad to see that there is now movement on that, and inspections are taking place and repairs are taking place. And I know they're talking about some revisions to the law. Right. Letting more people do inspections and some other things. I do have one concern about the law, which is, it mandates inspections of exterior elevated elements, decks, balconies, and such, but there's so much else to inspect at an HOA. Right. Some HOAs, so I'm afraid that those things are going to be left
to rot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a concern. And then, as we discussed a little while ago, the law does not pertain to high rises. So while we do have a solution,
it doesn't exclude them.
Yeah.
But they don't have wood elements supporting their balconies.
Right.
And so they don't fall under the inspection requirements.
Right.
But nonetheless, even though they're concrete and steel, concrete rusts because water gets in. It causes spalling of the concrete, and so you can have failures, which is what happened with Champlain Towers.
Yep.
And so I suspect we'll see more inspection requirements as time goes on.
Right.
And this will be good as long as they're reasonable requirements. Sometimes the legislature is not too reasonable.
Yeah.
They overreact and they impose requirements that just don't make sense on other things. And so as long as CLAC can get in there, can help moderate, and I think we'll see some good legislation come out of it.
Yep. And there is still quite a bit of confusion on the law and as it evolves. That's why, again, I commend everybody to take a look at Adrian's database website with all the information, but also subscribe to his newsletter, which is amazing, and learn more about it. Direct your boards to those information sites, and I just can't thank you enough, Adrian, for meeting us here today and talking to us about these subjects. And I really appreciate it.
Right. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you.